Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on unlocking growth opportunities with the female cannabis consumer. This webinar today is brought to you by the Cannabis LAB, which is an industry association on a mission to help professionals in cannabis learn, connect, and grow. You can find out more at joinclab.com. I've been a member of CLAB for the past 2 years, and it's given me great industry connections and growth in the space. And who am I? I am Tekisha Harvey. I am the co-founder of CannCurious magazine, which is a women's lifestyle platform whose mission is to educate women on the benefits of cannabis and CBD in a beautiful and approachable manner. I am also a managing partner and head of marketing at FlowerHire, the nation's premier executive search and HR advisory firm, which is exclusively focused on cannabis. Since 2017, we've placed over 1,000 executives in cannabis with an average salary of $140K. So what I try to do is make sure we're humanizing careers in cannabis as a legitimate, career growth opportunity. If you have any hiring or human capital needs, definitely hit us up. So for today, if you've been on for the past few minutes, you've heard us chatting. We have a great lineup for you. I'm super excited about this conversation. The female cannabis consumer is one of the fastest growing segments in the industry, and she is multifaceted. So knowing the data on this consumer can not only help you serve her better, but it also can help drive efficiency and profitability. So with that, I'm going to introduce our amazing panel, starting with Shannon Flynn. So Shannon is a lifelong connoisseur of cannabis who's worked in the industry for over a decade. She spent 10 years on the West Coast from the Emerald Triangle all the way down to LA, building on a successful global sales career in media and technology and retail and data-driven analytics. She works with her clients to unlock unique opportunities and the revenue-generating power of cannabis CBD with the wellness consumer. Welcome, Shannon. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Then we have Timeka Drew. Timeka is the founder of cannabis brand Biko, and she's also a social equity licensee in Los Angeles. She is also the faculty and head coach at Oaksterdam University, which is America's first cannabis college. Thank you for joining us, Timeka.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And then Christina Wong is a cannabis food, drink, and travel writer and content creator, and a self-proclaimed baked baker. From LA as well. She is the founder of Fruit and Flower, and her work has been featured in High Times Magazine, Thrillist, Cherry Bomb, CannCurious, and Kitchen Toke magazines. Welcome, Christina.
Hey, thanks so much for having me here.
So we're going to do something a little bit different. To kick things off, I want to take a look at the data. So Shannon has prepared a few slides to share with us about the female cannabis consumer, who she is, why she's using, and what she's buying. So let me share my screen so I can juicy insights. Since okay.
This is where we cue the Jeopardy music.
I know. I feel like, look at that. Okay. So here we go.
Thank you. Okay, so I think a good way to start this is just to set the table. The predictions are right now that the cannabis market will be $200 billion by 2028. So in less than 5 years, we're talking about a $200 billion global industry. And I think that that's just a really good entree into, now let's talk about one of the largest growing segments, which is female. We have data sources from multiple places in this presentation, and what we're seeing now is over a third of American women 21 plus are using cannabis. Over 60% of them are using daily or multiple times a day. What's interesting is there's another segment of the market that's only using about once a month. So it is a varied market. And one very interesting point, a lot of us in the industry and a lot of us who are developing products, I think we have an understanding that this is something that is just general and we're all approaching it. 65% of people who are using cannabis, specifically females, use it in a discretionary way. They keep it a secret from their friends, their family, their children. And that's something that we really have to take into consideration. You know, they're wanting to be a part of this industry, but they still have a lot of hesitation. And there is an opportunity there to create a relationship and to create trust and comfort with the female cannabis consumer. Can you go to the next slide? So let's look at a little bit why, you know, what is she, why does she use, when does she use? You know, a lot of it is about relaxing for her. A lot of it is about relief, whether it be stress or emotional, or one of the biggest is sleep. And this is, you know, definitely compounded since the pandemic. We noticed that a lot more, everything was about stress and everything was about how can I relax and how can I sleep. Women also tend to look to this plant more for medicinal and physical relief. So if they are having trouble with their menstrual cycle, if they are in menopause and looking for relief for certain symptoms there, they're going to look to this plant to solve those problems for them and find solutions. Social and hanging out is definitely there, but when a woman is looking at this plant, they're looking for solutions for their life. In that mode, if we think about what we talked about in the slide before, you know, there's still a huge amount of the population that is keeping this under covers. So when we look at their usage, it makes sense that they'd be really going for edibles. The majority of a female consumer go for an edible or some kind of discretionary method. The other piece is flower for sure, but certainly not as much as males. And vapes, as we were talking about in the beginning of the presentation, you know, we all love our vapes for certain reasons. I mean, Russ, you were just speaking about, I'd love it if someone would do a vape like a Sharpie, right? We love one that looks like something in our makeup bag. So these are things that we want to keep in mind about the female consumer, and I mean consumers in general. The other thing that's interesting about the female consumer is she certainly does look to other categories. She's more open to trying things. Again, topicals, tinctures, even some of the new products out on the market are a mouth spray, almost like breath spray, something discretionary, something that gives her potentially a low dose or the opportunity to updose a bit more throughout her day or however she chooses. Something she can put on her bedside table and use as a lotion instead of having to smoke. So she's a consumer who's really open to whatever these solutions are and how they could be delivered to her and integrated into her life. Another big point about women, again, and this kind of goes to they're looking for relief, they're looking for solutions, is they are certainly open to the combination of THC and CBD. They want to be educated. They want to understand more about how this can help their physical and emotional well-being. Next slide, please. Oops. So let's talk a little bit about her purchase behavior. They definitely like to purchase at a dispensary, that is for sure. I mean, I think that if the older consumer was used to not having to do that, but it's a welcome opportunity to have a safe, clean, safe environment. So 91% of women are purchasing at dispensaries. So a lot of retailers talk about how they're competing with the black market. That is really not going to be the case with your female consumer. You are not competing with home growers or the black market. So that's a really interesting opportunity. They want to come to your dispensary. They do spend a significant amount of money when they come. And that goes back to the slide before this, which is they're open. If they come in with a problem, I need help sleeping. And this next point, if you see, is that, you know, a third or more prefer to go to a female bud tender, maybe because they want to talk about girl things, you know, but they would be open to, if a bud tender were to recommend, yes, you came in for pre-rolls, but could I recommend to you a topical? Could I recommend a vape or a tincture or something like that, that speaks to a few of the other things that might be important to them, like discretion, or low dosing or high dosing, whatever it may be. They are certainly open to new categories, being influenced. Some of them definitely prefer that female interaction. So that's something to consider and maybe create a space for that female consumer to have that opportunity to have a more discretion conversation, excuse me. And one other really interesting point is they're less likely to use delivery services at this moment compared to men. So there's an opportunity there to really create that loyal relationship with them. We do see that if they're comfortable with its particular dispensary, they'd be more open to it. But in general, they're not the one that would want to just order something online and have it delivered to the house. So, that's a little bit about what we know today about the female consumer. And what I'd love to, as I end this part about the data is, the conversation with the female starts and ends in multiple places. It's an ongoing conversation. Where they are in their lives is going to drastically impact how they interact with a brand or a retailer. And the biggest thing that any company or someone trying to generate a relationship with her is really to start that trust and respect, meet her where she is and start to have a conversation with her about why she would be interested in this plant and what she's looking for solutions. And if you can, get her to open up and start to work with you and spend with you, she will stay loyal and spend consistently. And as I mentioned before, I think we all have to encourage each other as women, especially our heavy user women. If you have feedback, if you have comments, you should be a part of this conversation. I encourage you to get in touch with your retailer, give them feedback when they ask you for a survey, because through that data is how the market will evolve and better serve the female consumer. And, and then we'll generate more revenue for our companies. So that's a little bit about what I wanted to share with you today. And I think we can open it up to a conversation now. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon. I mean, you laid it out there, and I just had so many sparked so many more questions. And one of the things that, when we chatted last week about, or was that this week, was about like, there's different archetypes for the female cannabis consumer. She is multifaceted, and how she comes in can also help direct how brands, dispensaries should engage with her, because there's the people who are, we talked about, the person who's like looking for the wine replacement, like she just wants to take the edge off. There's the person that is, has maybe a health condition, and they're looking to transition to more natural remedies for a specific, wellness issue. And then there's people who are just experiential and just want to, say, hey, I hear about this. I want to try the newest thing. And so each of those female archetypes are going to be different consumers and have different needs, which is to say, it's not a one size fits all, but this is a good starting place. And speaking of starting, I'm going to start with Timeka, because, you have a brand that services both men and women. And I would love your thoughts on what you have seen as the differences between the male consumer and the female consumer for your flower brand.
Yes, thank you, Tekisha. I really love this conversation, because I think that in terms of looking at my own personal buying habits, I would probably look like a man, and I am definitely not a man, right? So I think that it is very important to make sure that we are considering high volume, high potency female consumers. And that's very much something that I was aiming to do with my brand Biko. But more than even worrying about creating a specific product for a specific consumer, I think the very first goal of mine was to create an experience that would speak to women who relied on cannabis. And I think that for me, as a woman in the space, and as a woman who has been in the space from the medical days until now, there's a lot about being a woman that, the same way that we might hide our cannabis consumption, there are other things that we hide about ourselves and our experience in this life. And for me, one of those things was really just experiencing trauma. And, 1 in 3 women globally experience some sort of violent trauma in their life. And I was finding myself being incredibly triggered by that trauma when trying to interact with cannabis retailers or cannabis brands in obtaining the cannabis medicine that I relied on. So for me, thinking about that female consumer and thinking about the fact that she is coming to cannabis more for solving something in her life, as the data was showing, and that experience around it, not just the product, but everything around that product, how the product makes you feel, how you feel about the way the product was made, how you feel about the way that brand or that company is interacting with the community that you're a part of. These are all, I think, incredibly important parts of the experience for women, and something that more brands should be focusing on when thinking about her.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about the fact that just being mindful of what's triggering to women, and what maybe seem as like glossy and fun can also be like isolating or triggering, or kind of make people be put off from a brand. It's not just about having a party. It really is about symptom relief. And some people who are like, oh, I work with a cannabis insight company and work with a client, and they were like, well, don't people just want to get high? And I said, get high to do what? To relax, to take the edge off. Like, there's always a latent desire attached to it. So it's not just, I think, just stopping at the party is, it's not giving the full story. So Christine, I want to go to you. And I want to, because you've worked for a cannabis brand, now you're doing your own thing, which is amazing. What do you think, or what do you see as like the biggest misconception about female cannabis consumers? Because I love your platform, and you're very vocal about how you use, when you use, why you use, and are unapologetic about it. And I think you create a space for people to also be unapologetic about their use. So what do you think is some of the biggest misconceptions?
Thank you. And so a couple of things too that kind of came from Shannon's slides and what Timeka said. I was thinking about the woman cannabis consumer. As a woman who consumes cannabis, when I walk into a dispensary, like recently, like I walked into a dispensary, I was just checking out what was in the edible section because I write some content for that particular dispensary, and I just wanted to see what they had, and ended up chatting with the bud tender. And after my conversation with him, I started thinking about, I'm like, what is the difference in, as a woman, speaking and getting recommendations from male bud tender versus a female bud tender? And Shannon's slide had said that, women are looking for other women to help give them guidance. And I would have to say, more often than not, I am speaking with a male bud tender when I walk in, and they're helpful, but the types of products, and particularly edibles in this experience, the brands and the products that the male bud tender was recommending to me I would have recommended different if I was a bud tender and I know most of the brands on the shelf. And so I asked him, I'm like, okay, can you tell me, why did you choose? Why would you recommend this? And so I was listening to what, and I think what he was looking for is different than what I was looking for in a brand. And we both kind of arrived at the same place. But it also comes down to marketing and branding on the shelves. For a lot of us who go to these industry events, a lot of this, I call it the TNA, tits and ass marketing, is really a turnoff. It really makes me not want to support those brands. And it's very prevalent in this industry. And as a woman consumer, I would like to go and make those choices and support the companies that represent me and who are also speaking up for me as well. So to me, like, that's really important. And that's a lot of information, and creating that type of content to tell that story is incredibly important. And then, okay, I lost track of your question. Your original question was.
Well, thank you, first of all, for elaborating on that. That was much needed. But also, the original question was about, what do you think are some of the misconceptions about the female cannabis consumer?
Thank you for the reminder. So I think some of the misconceptions, again, that everybody is low dose or only edibles. There are plenty of high dose women who consume high dose cannabis. They're also making choices and purchasing for their families, for the men in their lives. And the reason why they're choosing a particular brand or what they need to purchase is very different. And I like what you said about, like, it's not just the story. It's not just about getting high. It's about, we want to feel better. And as caretakers, as natural caretakers, we are making those types of choices. And when we spoke earlier this week, I was sharing, I wrote an article, or I was quoted in an article in Lifehacker about how to entertain with cannabis. And I provided a lot of tips and suggestions for if you're throwing a cannabis dinner party or you want to incorporate cannabis at your next party. Here's some tips and how to dose properly so that your guests are safe. And I made the mistake of going into the comments, and I looked, or not a mistake, but the comments were just going off. And what I noticed people were saying, mostly men, was like, oh, hell no, I would never put out my weed for like my friends to come consume. Like, everybody needs to bring their own. I would never put an edible out. And it made me really think, because as a person who is a consummate entertainer and a cook and hosts this, right, I am happy and generous to share and give that out and provide interesting experiences. But most of these comments from men were saying, like, right, it was a different mindset and a setting and a way of thinking about how you share your cannabis. And so that got me thinking about, the differences of consumption between men and women.
That's also a really good point, like an insight, and like, doing market research, or even just talking to consumers, as Shannon stated, giving your feedback, or even Timeka, you had elaborated by showing us this pen. The insight is usually someone probably didn't realize, hey, when I have my vape pen, all kinds of crap, and I put it in my bag, all kinds of crap gets into the tip, and I don't want to necessarily just, put it right into my mouth, and created a solution. And so like the insight there too around, women sharing in the communal nature of it. And we all were talking like, oh my God, yeah, every time someone comes to my house, it's like, here's what I have, and I didn't even think about it from that guys don't do that. And so that's an insight then that, businesses and companies could even think about as their marketing. And again, instead of, shifting from the TNA and the party to more communal sharing. And one of the things that we talked about with, opening up about cannabis use, cannabis consumption, how it opens up so many other conversations with women that are vulnerable, that basically I feel like would not have happened had we not kind of just shared this one aspect that typically can be kept in secret. So I think you're spot on. Shannon, do you have any other insights that you feel like are, or misconceptions about the female cannabis consumers that companies are just like missing the mark on?
Well, I like to focus on the positive, in the sense that everybody has a place in this market, and every company is allowed to develop products and have a suite of products that speak to multiple personas. So I'm going to answer it from that perspective. And I'm going to talk about the power of the female consumer and why I believe she is very unique to our opposite gender. And, if I could have paid for the prop of your kitty to come into the picture about 2 seconds ago, one of the things I wanted to talk about was in the terms of sharing, and combining it with what we talked about, is women are always looking for solutions, not only for themselves, but for their community around them. And one of the big ones is their pets. So the opportunity to then open up to an entirely new market, because a female consumer is not just focused on herself. Typically, she's focused on her parents, her pets, at times her children. This plant has been shown to solve many, many problems with people's children. So there is a whole side of this plant and this opportunity and market to talk to a woman about how she solves problems in her home and in her community that is very, very different. And, I don't want to say that a male doesn't think like that, but we know, and the data is there, that the female owns the wallet of the house. Whether they make the majority of the money or they don't, they typically are the ones that control the purse strings when it comes to the things that we're talking about, solutions to problems. So, I want to say that there is such an opportunity. What is unique about the female is the opening up of so many other opportunities to get inside her wallet and to get into the home, not just a consumer and thinking about one product. So that's what I think is really unique about her.
Thank you. I from my past, I worked for consumer packaged goods companies, and we always said like the female, it was the primary shopper. So there's a consumer and there's a shopper, and the female is the primary shopper. So almost like that's the gatekeeper for the household typically. Yeah. And also like it was interesting that you noted that she's open to being influenced because she is also the influencer. So it's like it's just such an important person to make sure that you're connecting with. We talked about, I would curious about like, just from a branding perspective or brands, Timeka, in your perspective, because you've been in the game a long time, like who do you see as some big brands that are like kind of doing some really interesting things or good things to connect with different market segments, because I'm going to go with what Shannon said. It is about multiple personas. And like I said, it's not just a female. She has different need states and different occasions when she needs to use it. But do you see any big brands that are doing some interesting things to make sure that they're actually segmenting and talking to different consumer groups?
Well, I mean, I'll just say gender inclusivity is something that is, I think that people talk about it as a buzzword, it's marketing, people, they want to talk about it. But in the cannabis industry, I don't think people really realize that the main person that anybody cared about was this young to middle-aged male. And it was the only person that anybody, was focusing on, and pretended like that was the only person who had money to buy cannabis. And so even having these panels, we're talking in a very polite way about this and the female consumer, but when you get back into a real corporate setting, they're talking about that female consumer like she's one of 100 people that might buy your cannabis. And so like you market to her to have good marketing stuff going on, but you don't worry about her as an actual consumer. And so I guess for me, I'd like to center the conversation around just the reality of the fact that you can focus on a female consumer or on a gender inclusive consumer and not take away male consumption and buying your product, right? And I'm here as Biko to say, hey, we've created a product by women, for women, not exclusively, but intentionally. And plenty of men buy our product. Sometimes more men than women are buying our product in a month, right? And I think that that's important because I think that sometimes when brands and people that are thinking even to start brands want to come from an authentic place of speaking to women. And if their product isn't specifically something for the female body, they're thinking to themselves, am I going to take away a large segment of people who might support this brand or support this product just by the way I present myself and present the product and present the brand? And we have not found that to be the case with Biko. I'm not directly answering your question by naming anybody who's doing a good job, but
No.
mostly because I somewhat think that many of the big brands that are doing things, they're great, but I don't know that they're actually authentic and rooted in figuring out that, me as a consumer or any of you ladies as a consumer, I feel like it might be just kind of a checking the box of like, we've got to do this. We've got to have some stuff where it's like, we're putting some women up and, International Women's Month. Hey,
I'm like,
all the things, but is that really what we're focused on? Same during Black History Month, same during, all of the months, is this really what does this brand even think about a Black consumer? Does this brand even think about Black women at all? We're all just broken. We don't have money to buy the cannabis. So, these stereotypes are real. They're incredibly prevalent in the cannabis space. And I think that we should probably talk more about them.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like, I'm trying to be that change. Look at this panel. I'm like, every time I have an opportunity, I'm like, I'm bringing different voices. I'm bringing representation because I know it matters. And as a lifelong marketer, it's like, it's having that conversation of trying to justify why segmentation is important and why it works. I worked on Chunky Soup, coming out of business school. And I'd say all of their marketing was to men. However, 50% of the consumers were women. So it's like, you can't, and that was, to me, was the biggest example of you can target and still not alienate. But, so, because it's always like people's fear, like, oh, I don't want to leave anyone out. But it's like, almost if you're not connecting with a distinct consumer group or with their specific needs, you're not necessarily talking to them at all. So, Christina, I want to take it to you. What have you seen? Because I think you have a really interesting perspective in your work, because I think it's just beautiful and I like pretty things. But like, I think you interact with between hosting events and cooking and connecting with so many different people in cannabis. What have you seen as like some of the things that stand out to you that brands can be doing to better connect with different consumer groups and the female audience?
Absolutely. And to Timeka's point, all the brands, Women's Month, yay, whatever, yay, celebrate me, cool, feature us, but also, work with us. And representation matters. Seeing faces and people who look like us, who consume like us. And there was a moment also on my Instagram, I remember when I was starting, I was like, I don't want to show myself smoking. Smoking is a very big stigma, definitely amongst women, definitely a lot of cultural stigma for me personally and many others. And when I saw other Asian, like badass Asian women chefs smoking cannabis, I was like, okay, cool. Like, right, they're smart, they're successful, they do what they do. And like, I shouldn't be afraid of that. And so I started doing more of it and I started talking more about that. And so I think for brands, it's, don't just celebrate us that one time a month, work with us, create content that is sharing those types of faces and those types of stories. And something that I do with my friend Wendy Zhang, we host something called Mogu Magu, and we celebrate our all Asian cultural holidays together with food and cannabis. And what happens is when we get together in a space like that and we start to have conversations, so much community and positivity and healing and connection happens there. And even at the FlowerHire event, we were saying how the two women who founded Hello Again, they were saying on their panel how they were older women, they'd been friends forever, and they had never talked about their sex life. Never, until they started doing this product. And then, even Timeka and I, we spend time in each other's circles and communities, and so many wonderful conversations happen out of that. We talk about menopause as women, and our sexuality. On Valentine's, I did a Galentine's event with a few people at my house, just really talking about women's sexuality and the brands that came to support that, to tell that story, to be a part of it. So it's not just about, for the brands who are wanting to speak to a gender inclusive or female voice, it's be a part of the conversation. Don't just market and talk at us, participate, be a part of that community. And there's plenty of men and white men who show up in my spaces as well, because they are wonderful allies and they ask questions and they're there and they pay us equally for gigs. They participate, and that is really important.
Can I make one point? So I feel like we really orchestrated this prior to, yet it's so organic how this is coming together. I want to make two comments. I think Foria is a wonderful brand, and I think they do a really good job of not only creating a great product for a female, but also for a couple. And I think they do incredible marketing to the male that might be comfortable buying that product to bring it into the home. So I will shout out to Foria, and I have followed them for years and think their product evolution is extraordinary as well. So that would be my A+ in that. I also, my personal favorites, Miss Grass and Edie Parker. From a smoking perspective, I really like what they're doing. Her Highness as well. I mean, I like pretty things too. But one thing I want to talk about that's very timely and also speaks to what we just talked about, which is this bro culture and also how you create this conversation with the female consumer. I am so excited about the #1 brand in the world, Burner Cookies, and his collaboration with Erykah Badu and her mission. So I hope people know about her. And I went into a dispensary and I got so excited and I was talking about it. And the dispensary person said, I don't even know who you're talking about. I was like, oh, Jesus, we'll just please Google Erykah Badu. But she is a goddess and a musician and an artist. But she's also a doula. She's also very involved in her life in medicine and female health and wellness. So she has now created a collaboration. And if you look at some of the press on this and how she's even launched this on her own social profiles, to her, this was a very divine moment. And I love that she picked the #1 brand, not only in the world, but also with one of the largest male dominant feelings. Cookies is not a brand. I mean, Cookies maybe speaks to the high dose female, but I'm a high dose female and it hasn't spoken to me yet. I'll just say from a personal perspective. So the fact that they're going to collab together and she is so focused on female wellness and health, that is the mission of her line, is all about women's health from the beginning to the end and everything in between. So I think that's an incredible collab. And if that shows us movement in the market of how we can come together and we can create that conversation from both sides, that makes me very excited for the future, for sure.
Yeah, so and she's on the cover of this month. If you don't know who she is, she's on the cover of Vogue this month. So
Well, we're going to get her on the cover of CannCurious.
yes, say it. But speaking to this inclusivity, one of the people that we featured in CannCurious was Jess Jackson, who runs a copper house in Detroit, and she also does marketing, and she does it also around size inclusivity, and like also just making sure that you're not just seeing like the skinny woman on the top of a mountain smoking a J, like that, again, there are so many different types of people, so many types of bodies, women, men, et cetera, consuming cannabis. And I think that the idea is that broaden your scope and see what people's specific needs are, and create products that speak to them, and that equals connection, that equals loyalty, that equals repurchase if your price point's right. So it's just about, I think cannabis in general is still in its infancy, and has so much room to grow. And what we're all trying to do, I think everyone that's passionate about this plant is trying to make this industry better than existing industries. And so like we have to kind of apply that same innovative thinking and new thinking, and not try to kind of build it with the same legs as previous industries and hope it works, because I think it's just learning that the world is evolving, and we need to, cannabis can step up and evolve and kind of be the leader in the pack in doing that, and people not being afraid that, financially they're going to suffer as a result of it. So I'm just loving this conversation. And I was like, I had some questions, but then I feel like I just like how it's going. I would ask this, and I'll see who wants to answer, but where do you guys see the female, how do you see the female cannabis consumer evolving? I think we brought up one good point about what I feel cannabis has done, and being in the cannabis space or having a magazine for the last 2.5 years, was it has created a community for me of women who are able to actually connect and share about what's going on with their bodies. A conversation that I feel like never happened, even though we all have the same things or a lot of similar things happening. So I'm curious about, what are your thoughts on, how do you see this cannabis consumer evolving? And even just, I feel like women in general evolving as a result of, just being a part of the cannabis community. Anyone want to take that first?
I'll take it first. Or do you want to take it? Okay. Just because I have a real quick one. I think that you kind of almost hit the point, which is this plant is about connection and expansion. And it's about, at its purest form. And so if we even took it away from just the plant, what I hope that this will do is bring us closer to nature in general. Because the cannabis plant is not the only plant in the world that has an enormous amount of solutions and medicinal properties and the ability to heal in the home and in our lives. So, I think it's going to do two things. It's going to create that individual conversation with your own self, help you connect to yourself, which will help you connect to nature more, to be more open to looking at other plants that might help you. Well, if, CBD and cannabis work, maybe I should try that chamomile tea my mom's been telling me about for 35 years that might help me sleep, or maybe I should try arnica, or maybe, so I think they'll open up to a world of natural healing that maybe they hadn't been open to before, because they've had such relief in solutions with this plant. And and the connection to nature in general. Hopefully what it does is really give them a renewed sense that the answers are there. If you choose to go out and connect to yourself and nature and your community, you can find what you're looking for. So I see it, and I hope for more of that.
Awesome. Timeka?
I think for me, I see the female cannabis consumer as really being able to embrace the empowerment that I feel cannabis is really able to help us with. I think that, when we're speaking plainly about it, cannabis for so many of us has been a life-saving option that was not allowed due to really a patriarchal structure that was keeping it from us, right? And so for me, being able to learn that there were ways to break down that structure, right? And the people did that, the medical patients, and then all of the people that have been lobbying for adult use across the country. the more that we can start having that normalization, the more we can be using our voices to be demanding those options inside of the cannabis industry and everywhere, that we need to have more of an ability to say, what we've been given is not working. Maybe it works for a majority of men because that's what it was developed to do, right? We know so many of our drugs, so much of our medicine, so many of the experiences that we're expected to be utilizing in our life were 100% designed for men. So, understanding that this is a time where we've learned about something that we've been, had access to for thousands of years, that has worked for us. And now we're kind of coming back into that. I think that cannabis consumer, somebody that I think we're definitely downplaying her. There's supposedly this certain percentage. I think that percentage is much bigger. I think that the more we feel comfortable in ourselves and in what this plant can do for us, the more we're going to be able to talk about it.
Awesome. And Christina, where do you see the cannabis consumer evolving?
I will say that, I would like to see that there's so much opportunity in providing more education and information. I think about, any brands or anybody sitting in on this webinar and think about, how can I tap into women as my target audience to increase my sales? That's what this is all about, right? How can everybody's looking for more sales? And what we're trying to create high dose products because that's what's moving, but that's generally the male consumer. But what we're not realizing is that's only going to take us so far. We really have to focus on that purchasing power of the 80% of women that are buying for their homes, because that is where we're going to unlock more new consumers as cannabis continues to legalize. In California, it's become very, nonchalant, but in other states, other places, it's very much still stigmatized. And to the women who are just discovering this plant, who are curious, but maybe don't have all the information yet, I think brands, we really need to provide more information in a space and having those types of conversations where it's not intimidating, it's not preachy, that it doesn't feel too weedy, and it feels it's welcoming. And a lot of times when I was new to the space and I walked into my first dispensary, I didn't feel welcomed. It took a long time for me to find a community where I felt comfortable talking about this. And so as more women become more curious, let's learn more. And I hope that cannabis has a way to unlock what's inside of them. For me, it's made my relationships better. It's made sex better. I sleep better. I enjoy my food. I'm more present, and I'm a much happier version of myself, and more honest version of myself. And I see that for women as well, as this continues to spread, as New York and Michigan and all these other states are coming online, and this plant spreads further and farther.
I feel like you just gave a commercial for CannCurious and why we thank you. No, it's very validating. You're like, oh, my idea, because basically it was, where do I go to get educated? Where do women go to get educated? I'm a newbie. I don't know where to start. I'm intimidated. People talk to me in plain language. I'm going to confuse what CBD is. And so that's literally why we started, was like, well, it doesn't exist. Let's create it and partner with, brands to help build that audience that they want to connect to, and also to validate that she exists. Like, she's here, she wants to learn, she's curious, she's evolving through cannabis. I love what you said, Shannon, as well, about connection to self and connection to nature, because I feel like in general in the world, we kind of have lost a lot of that, and understanding ourselves a bit more helps us not rage out on people and address and make sure we are healing ourselves, and understanding that going back to nature, that nature is healing, walking barefoot. I don't know if anyone, when's the last time you walked barefoot on grass? But yes. It's something that we've kind of lost. We're always in shoes. And then Timeka, like, finding your voice. Like, when we started, me and my business partner started CannCurious, we were like, it's like about women's liberation, like talking about things we haven't talked about, being okay to say, I'm a parent, but I also consume cannabis, and here's why, and being able to, and so we felt like, okay, let's create that space and give women that language to kind of profess and say, this is why I'm using it. And we, again, that influential aspect of women in community is just, I don't know, I just feel like you can't ignore it. And we're gonna wrap up. I want to know if anyone has any questions. I'm gonna ask the panel one last question. So if you have a burning question, just pop it in the Q&A and we'll get to it in the last 10 minutes. But I want to ask each of you to go around and I'm gonna play like, you know, you had a magic wand. What's one thing that you would wish to see differently in the cannabis space right now?
Ooh,
Ooh.
ooh. All right, I'll start. I would like to see us come together more. I would like us to not be so divided, because it feels so divided. And I've been in this space for 10 years and in business for 30. And I think I was very naive that I thought coming into this business, things would be so much more kumbaya, to just put it frankly. I really thought we would all just hug trees together. I wouldn't be dealing with the same thing I've been dealing with in tech and data and media and retail my whole career. I thought it would be different, and it has not been. So that's been extremely sobering. And so before I leave this industry, I hope that we can all look at each other and stand together on behalf of the plant, as opposed to, take a stake and this is my area and this is my area. Like, can we all just say we love Doritos? Okay. It doesn't matter what flavor you like, but we all love Doritos. So let's just go that, from MJ Biz to a business conference to even social events. I've been to all of them from the East Coast to the West Coast, and it is becoming even more divided. And I would love for that to just stop and come together, because that is not, if the plant was leading the way as opposed to profit, that is not the way things would be going. And that's, I don't know if we're going to turn the Titanic on profit over people. That's like a global issue, but that would be my dream for the industry, is that we come back to more connection and expansion together.
Awesome. Thank you. Christina?
Oh man, so this is the magic wand of anything, right? I mean, I think very much like a global issue, but also in this industry, I would like to see their misogyny to be gone. Honestly, it's to Timeka's point, it's traumatizing, it's terrifying. And I think we forget that we're seeing it because social media has created this monster in a way. And it feeds it, and we click into it, and we tap into it. And I would like to say, like, I find myself in a really wonderful space of community where I don't experience it as much, but I know it's out there. A lot of us feel it in our jobs day to day, in relationships, just out in the world. And there's a lot of hate, and there's a lot of anger out there. And so if I could wave my magic wand, I would like misogyny and all of that hate and anger to go away in our industry and everywhere.
You're here.
I'm not far behind you, Christina. If we could do like an eradication of patriarchy with the wand, that's the main focus of, I believe, my life. But in the cannabis industry specifically, I do really wish that we could have a greater focus on community reinvestment and just really not forget about the war on drugs and the fact that people are still being put in jail for cannabis. People are still being followed and terrorized and traumatized around this plant that literally saved my life. And so I just really think that we're at a moment in the industry as well where we all assume we all want the same things. We do not. It has become very clear that there are people that do not want to focus on this community reinvestment. There are people that just want this social equity conversation go away. Can we stop talking about it? Can we get to the business and to the money? Get to those 200 billion, get to that conversation. So I just really think we need a much greater focus on how we can work together to ensure that the people that have been and the communities that have been decimated by the war on drugs are actually seeing not only focus, but they're seeing investment.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for your responses. I mean, they are amazing, and I had a sobering kind of interaction with someone. And I'm like, that's like a couple years ago. And I was like, oh, I'm in cannabis. Cannabis is great. And then he was like, I did a year in jail for cannabis. So I'm not excited about it, because he's like, I lost a year of my life. I can't get it back. And it was kind of like, oh yeah, there really are people who, yeah, like he can't get that year back, and it's like for something that now is legal, he was like, I'm not excited about it. And so it was sobering for me to kind of go back to, okay, yeah, there is this whole other half that we can't forget and we shouldn't forget. And all the money that, the lawmakers are making with taxes, making sure they are connecting it back to, improving communities that, were disproportionately impacted. So, I'm going to turn over to a couple questions I said that are in the chat. Clark wrote, I'm interested in everyone's views about the path cannabis events will take. With talk of consumption lounges gaining popularity across the country, how can women in the event space prepare for this shift and lead event spaces? You want to take that?
I have a thought on that. One of my thoughts is don't wait for the consumption lounge license to come around. Figure out compliant ways to have your events, because for me, that's almost a new war on drugs to say, hey, you have to have a license for all the adults to get together and smoke cannabis that they're buying legally. So being able to utilize delivery partners and work with retail partners to be able to kind of deliver compliantly into safe consumption spaces is a really good way to consider that.
I love that. Don't wait.
And I would also say, out of all of the different events that I've gone to, really, if you're going to be hosting an event, if you're creating something, think about what is it that you're trying to say? What do you want the people coming to your event to do? How do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to leave feeling? Because I go to too many, I'll call them the weed parties, where it's just a bunch of people getting high and that's it. And there's really no meaning behind it. There's no authenticity, and it's fun. It's a good time. Yay, free weed. But I don't walk away feeling better. I don't walk away with connections with, that authenticity. And sometimes that requires a little bit extra thought. It's curating that event a little more, but put some passion, put some purpose behind your events, and it will go so much further, because you're going to create brand loyalists who will love your products, who will love the community. And so often I get messages from people on my channel saying man, you look like you have so much fun with all your friends. I wish I had a group of friends near me who I could do that with. I wish we could do this together. And so there's people out there who want to do this. They just don't know where to look, or they'll say, my friends are mostly moms and they all drink wine, but they don't like pot. And so I hide it. And so it's creating a space for that person to come and to meet each other and to create community. That's to me, that's what cannabis infused events and consumption lounges are all about.
Yeah, intentionality. I love how do you want people to feel? What do you want them to walk away with? I live in Florida, cannabis is legal medically, but we host events where we teach people how to roll joints, and we use hemp flower. And it's even people attend from all walks of life, people who are, longtime cannabis consumers to people who are newbies, because the experience of I've always wanted to try to roll a joint. And now here I can come and commune with other people and feel safe to learn, and so there's options outside of, again, it's not a consumption event, but then people go outside and smoke the hemp flower, which is legal. So it's we found a way to still create an event, create that community, create that destigmatization, and people still have a good time. It's something different to do. So I want to get to this question that someone had around why do you know, Shannon, why females are less likely to choose delivery versus men? Is it a safety issue, or do you have any insights in that around that?
I don't have any data to back it up, but I'd go with what you said. That would be my assumption, is a safety issue potentially. But I also think it could be coupled with wanting an education, and that person who can't pick from the menu or go to Leafly, they want that Doritos or Tylenol experience. They want to go in and talk about it and figure out what they want to buy and have that. So I would put those two. I just want to give one plug for I feel like events are getting better. Again, having spent a decade doing this, I thought MJ Biz had some really interesting parties, but I want to shout out to Boston. Like, we've been doing some really interesting things where we've had like tea parties, brunches, and women come together and get to meet a few vendors and hear some content and education. And I think people are doing and bringing in sound baths and having that different kind of experience. I mean, believe me, we had Cypress Hill here last weekend. It's all, we have that too. But I will say that it feels very LA to me, having spent 5 years in LA and come back to Boston. I think we're getting there. And you know, I'm ready for the baby goat yoga and consumption brunch as well, you know, and I'm ready for the farm to table. You know, those are things that I think New England people would really love when Maine starts doing, you know, things around blueberry pies and infusion dinners and things like that. You know, it's happening for sure. And again, I think we just have to give our feedback. Every time we go to an event, we should say something. I would love it if you, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, like, yeah, like those farm to table dinners, like I was just doing a demo at a farm to table, like farmers market style event a couple weeks ago. There's I did a Diwali in Dabs where we celebrated Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights, and
cool.
culture at the same time. And so those types of events are happening. Like, and the hard part is, you know, people say like, how do I know about them? And so a lot of those are underground. And so you kind of know, but it's starting to come up. But I try to list the events and share cool things when I see them. If you follow me on my newsletter and on my Instagram, Fruit and Flower.
Yeah,
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we actually have one of these events coming up this weekend. It's called the Flowers and Flowers Festival that Biko is in partnership with Plant Bitch Cannabis to throw. And this is actually a music and art festival that is 420 friendly. So all the vendors that will be there, there'll be compliant deliveries, and all the tickets are like a compliant purchase. So it's just kind of a way to, and what I was really going to say is, events that really focus on something and then bring the cannabis to kind of be able to add to that event, I think are really where it's going. Cannabis as the focus of the event is so kind of early 2000s. Now it's kind of, we want to go have our experiences, but we also want the cannabis there. So it's all about creating those experiences.
Right. It just, the cannabis enhances that experience. It just, in so many different ways. And I saw your Flowers to Flowers festival and so stoked about it.
Yeah, there's also a, I think Event High, it's kind of like Eventbrite, and you can, if you subscribe, you can start to see different events because as they post on there in a space for kind of cannabis safe events. I'm seeing more diversity of types of events too. So we're just about at time. I really enjoyed this conversation. Y'all my friends for life. This is what I feel like I came into the cannabis space for, was being able to connect with amazing women, amazing human beings in the space who I can learn from, who I can share with. And if you guys go look them up, find where to follow them: Timeka Drew, Biko Flower, Christina Wong, Fruit and Flower, Shannon. Where do I find you? LinkedIn, Shannon Flynn.
Flynn Consulting.
Yes. She's amazing. As you can see, she's full of knowledge. And I just want to thank you guys so much for your time. This has been a great panel. Thank you all for attending. A panel post recording will be sent out to everyone that attended. And thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.